On August the 5th, 2002, the Murree Christian School in Pakistan was attacked. Suzanne and Russell Morton were present at the school at the time. Russell was director of the school. Suzanne was the French and music teacher. Several very loud percussive bangs, muffled only slightly by the thick stone walls of the high school, signalled the start of the attack. Men had been erecting heavy steel fencing for weeks, and loud noises were common. But this was different. Even through 12 inches of stone, Kalashnikovs make a distinctive sound. Within seconds, the solid front doors were bolted. Staff ran to secure the side door. One closed the access through the student lounge, and one, caught outside when the firing began, dashed in and secured the rear door. The one we had recently faced with steel, as it seemed weaker than the rest. Out on the playground, the teacher of a small group of elementary children recognised the sounds and bundled the children indoors. Classes had been underway for 10 minutes, but a shower of rain had kept all but this one class indoors. On a fine day, there would have been other groups caught in the open. The attackers moved carefully and purposefully through the campus. They took few risks. They knew where they were going, they knew where our guards were, they knew, or thought they knew, that many people would be in the dining room of the boarding hostel for a coffee break. But their plans were confused and they were 15 minutes late. We now know they've been living quietly nearby for 2 months, planning the attack. Another security guard was ambushed and killed. An office worker caught in the open was shot. Boarding staff saw the gunmen coming and locked the doors. Frustrated, they fired through the windows of the dining room and made efforts to batter in the doors of the boarding hostel. We've been worried about those doors. They were old and reasonably solid but ill-fitting. Importantly, they opened outwards and stoutly resisted rifle butts and kicks. Back in the high school, students have been shepherded into upstairs rooms where they're sitting quietly out of sight. We discussed the lockdown situation with them and they understood what was required of them. We now know there were 4 attackers plus more outside the perimeter fence. One left early when his gun jammed. 6 men died, 5 staff and 1 man caught at the front gate. The terrorists took their time. MCS is only 3 acres in extent and it takes less than 4 minutes to walk from one end to the other. God's hand in protection was evident in this tragic event despite the evil perpetrated and the immense cost to the community. There were many miracles, large and small, which combined to limit the injury and loss. Some students who spent a very long hour hiding in rooms on the upper floors during the attack heard singing coming from above them. There must have been angels in the rafters, one said. There were.
Hello dear friends and colleagues from MCS. I thought I might just tell you a little bit of the effects of the angels. They've had a lot of travelling around to do in the years apart, but I still have lots of inquiries about the book. Can I borrow one? Can I use it here and there? And it's wonderful for them to read this story of God's goodness. Goodbye for now. Sue.
The period from 2001 to 2004 was quite a turbulent time for the world and MCS, with 9/11 and the attack on the school. Russell Morton came from Australia to become director of MCS in mid-2001. Student numbers were about 150. On September 11, just a few weeks into the school year, the 9/11 attack occurred in New York, with the link to Osama bin Laden next door in Afghanistan, and with the threats to anything Western and Christian in Pakistan, the school was advised to close. Some families left Pakistan, but education continued for MCS students around the world. I can remember marking and sending essays via email. The senior students returned to MCS in February 2002, followed by the rest of the school a few weeks later. It was great to be back, but we realised that life wasn't going to be the same. Higher walls, fences and guard stations were built around the school. The March attack on PIC occurred, greater restrictions on moving around, cancellations of tournaments due to safety fears. One of the highlights for our senior students was the opportunity to compete in the CISA track and field in Colombo and win the senior section. Coming back after the July break in 2002 with the tragic death of Dale Stock, the 2002-03 school year was shattered by the terrorist attack on the school on August the 5th. 6 Pakistani men, including 2 staff members, were tragically killed, and God miraculously saved many lives that day and enabled the school to be re-established in Chiang Mai, Thailand. How God's angels protected many of the school community on that day is recounted in Angels in the Rafters. Each person has their story of God's rescue on that day. My wife Georgina's cooking of gingerbread biscuits with her kindergarten class that day meant that they weren't on the basketball court when the gunman entered the school property and so saved their lives. Comprising about 70 students and about 20 staff, the school was able to continue and even present students for exams in Chiang Mai. There were many challenges, but God provided counselling and care for our hurting community in Chiang Mai. The fact that 26 students were baptised while we were there was evidence that God was at work even in the midst of trying times. Many people helped to support us in Chiang Mai, and Russell Morton and Rupert Abbott, the board chairman, provided clear and caring leadership for the MCS community. God's hand could be seen in many God incidences in those 2 years in Chiang Mai. From Bobby and Tussany, who were willing to provide all the meals for the boarders, redevelop one floor of their building for accommodation, and build an outdoor cafeteria, to CMIS, which just happened to have 200 spare places in their school for our students, to the International Church, which just happened to have a 3-storey building with classrooms that could be used from Monday to Friday. We were still able to have baccalaureate, grad and skip. There was a drama production even. Students were able to sit external exams and achieve some of the best results ever. Participation in lots of sporting events was able to take place, and we even won the track and field tournament against 8 other bigger schools. I still remember that first service that we all attended at the International Church. The pastor said, "Stand up if you are new here." And we all stood up, 100 of us. God had brought us miraculously to Chiang Mai and put us among brothers and sisters who would care for us. We were thankful that God had led Russell and Sue Morton with all their years of experience to MCS for such a time as this. We appreciated Russell's calm and godly leadership in all the upheavals. At the same time, back in Pakistan, Leo was organised in Lahore for some elementary students with a small team of staff for boarding and teaching. It was a difficult time for our national staff at MCS as the school closed indefinitely. But Mr. Simon and Mr. Albert did a great job in taking care of the property in those 2 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Joel Gonske, class of 2006. Auntie Eunice asked if I could share some brief memories from my time at MCS after it reopened in 2004. I'm glad to have finished grade 11 and 12 with the others in the MCS family, and I'm happy to share some of those memories with you. I remember Mr. Lanz's faith-inspiring sermon at the reopening service, and the sense of a new season for MCS. New curriculum and schedules, a smaller student body, new lockdown drills with armed guards, but also a revived opportunity to serve the country and a renewed focus on working out our faith in student-led worship nights and Bible studies. I remember having the opportunity to interview Mr. Simon about the aftermath of the August 2002 attack. Even though I was there, I learned for the first time a full picture of what had happened that day, and moreover, what he and Mr. Albert had dealt with during the months and years afterward. The evidence gathering, identification of terrorists, the court hearings, and their incredible grace and courage in that season. The following year, as seniors, we dedicated the Kahani to these two men as outstanding examples of faithfulness to God. I remember everyone doing the best they could, considering the challenges of limited staff and resources and tight restrictions on leaving campus. Staff and parents filled the gaps when we didn't have enough teachers. Student council planned events every Friday and Saturday for a school full of energetic kids. And house parents cared for us crazy teenagers through the winter for the first time. I remember waking up on Saturday morning, October 8th, 2005, to the sound and shaking of the 7.6 magnitude earthquake that struck near Balakot. God was faithful to protect us again and allowed us to organize financial and practical assistance for the national staff who were affected. That year, our grade 12 class skip was a trip to Balakot to help build the shelters and transport relief goods. I remember cold winter days in January and February coming into the high school after lunch to warm up around the heaters, and the mid-morning warmth of the sun as it peeked over the hilltops on crisp April mornings. I remember the sense of hope that came from knowing there was always a warm cup of chai waiting for me at morning break and after school. I remember the late-night noodles in the senior boys' dorm with spontaneous dog piles that had become a cultural norm. I remember long coaster rides to Natia Gali, Mokshapuri, or Khanpur for spiritual retreats, campouts, and hikes. And I remember the 50th anniversary celebrations at Grad in June 2006, when Larry Cuthrell unveiled the monument in the D by the hostel. As a senior class, we read from Psalm 136, describing God's faithfulness to MCS over the years. Some of us experienced the best years of our lives at MCS, and some of us the hardest. Maybe both. As I continue to observe God's presence and purposes in my journey, my chapter at MCS and the story of the MCS community more broadly continue to stand out to me as a monument to the faithful love of God despite our imperfection, the challenges of community and international life, and the ups and downs of serving in Pakistan. I've come to be able to say with conviction that all things really do work out for the good of those who are in Jesus. I'm thankful to God for seeing me through it all, and I hope the same for you as well.
Built upon a firm foundation, in God's hands a tool. These words ring truer to me and more evident every day. Like most MKs, I struggle to define home. Yet as years went by, I understood. I always knew where home was. As I heard of MCS closure, it broke my heart dearly. I felt as if my identity was ripped from me, or that I lost my nationality, or as if a loved one has departed from me. Yet over the last few months, I came to realize, though I have left MCS, MCS has never left me. I know where's the home I cherish, where my foundation was laid, and I know of Christ, who laid the first cornerstone. I see my home throughout every day, whether that's eating noodles on toast or using Korean noodles as currency. I see my home, and I am sure of my foundation. MCS has continued to bless me and will always be with me. Indeed, within her halls of learning, wisdom's torch burns bright. Whether that's music or carpentry or football or theology, much of my identity is rooted in the Himalayas. I remember the Sunday football matches, the Saturday morning games, the Friday evening movies, and thieving monkeys every day. I miss the deep snow where we dug trenches instead of walls for the ever-constant snowball fights in freezing, icy winters. Lord, with thanks and praise we honor Murree Christian School. I am grateful to have been shaped so profoundly, so completely. May her life and fame and service for thee ever rule. As we continue our lives of dedication, we will always, always be at home.
In June 2004, 8 MCS seniors graduated together with their classmates at Chiang Mai International School. Over the previous months, much effort had been put towards the reopening of MCS in August 2004. The board was thankful for several applications for teaching and boarding staff. Andrew Gordon was appointed as new director. He was an experienced teacher in math, science, and computer and had excellent administrative skills. The school reopened on 22nd August 2004 with 44 students, 36 of them in boarding. It was a very special day for the missionary community in Pakistan. Many families came with their children Former and new MCS staff were there. Many guests came from all over Pakistan and abroad to join MCS for this special occasion. It was very moving to see the familiar faces. After 2 years of separation, we were able to celebrate the MCS reopening service together. In the story of the dedication of the new wall of Jerusalem, which was built under Nehemiah's supervision, it says in Nehemiah 12:43, "Many sacrifices were offered on that joyous day, for God had given the people cause for great joy. The women and children also participated in the celebration, and the joy of the people of Jerusalem could be heard far away." My husband Eddie Lanz had the privilege to preach the sermon on that day. He chose passages from the book of Nehemiah under the title, "The Grace of a New Beginning." There were huge challenges to overcome, with few people on staff, some only short-term, many changes regarding security, changes in the school calendar and curriculum. But we also felt encouraged by God and experienced how He was providing for the needs of the school. Some of the previous traditions were reinstalled, like camp out, talent shows, spiritual emphasis weekend, and the skip of our son Daniel, the one and only senior that year. Something new started as well. Daniel and the grade 11 started youth group on Friday evenings as a school activity run by themselves. They led the worship, prepared the message, and led the small groups. Over the years, this became an important time of spiritual fellowship and learning. In April 2005, almost all the students in MCS took part in the performance of the play The Music Man, which was fun to watch and very enjoyable. Our son Daniel's graduation in May 2005 was again a very special gathering. It felt very much like the celebration of a mission family event in the community. All who attended were enjoying the fellowship together. In October 2005, the earthquake devastated many areas in the north of Pakistan. In Murree it was also felt very much. Thankfully at MCS all the buildings were fine and nobody got hurt. For the months to come, many missionaries and also MCS staff and students were involved in relief work. The implementation of the child protection policy and the process which followed led to the resignation of Andrew Gordon as director of MCS on 27 January 2006. This was a painful experience and deeply troubling for MCS community. More than ever we felt the need to draw on God's grace and gather around the staff and students to support them. The board appointed Larry Cuthrell as interim director. He picked up the role mid-term and encouraged the school to move forward through a difficult time. The board was taking steps to improve the orientation and pastoral care of staff. With the changes in the MCS and Murree community arising out of no longer meeting as a large mission community in the summers, the need was felt to find new ways to help with orienting new staff and providing for pastoral care. In June 2006, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of MCS. The Kahani was dedicated to God. The seniors wanted to thank Him for His faithfulness in providing staff, resources, facilities, and protection through the years. They wrote, "As a class, we are grateful to Him for enabling us to return to and graduate from MCS. We look forward to His continued faithfulness to the school." Many former students, parents, and staff came to be part of the different activities offered at MCS and exploring the surrounding area. The theme was celebrating God's faithfulness from generation to generation. It was an appropriate theme, and we had much to celebrate. We had again seen God's faithfulness in bringing us to this point in the school year. The board requested Larry Cuthrell to continue in the capacity of director into the next year as the search process continued. Since reopening MCS, the numbers of students increased and more than 80 students attended MCS by now. At the board meeting in February 2007, Jim Breeze stepped down as chairman of the board in order to offer his services of pastoral care to MCS staff and also to take on the role of honorary treasurer, which had been vacant for a couple of years. I was appointed the new chairman of the board. In June 2007, 8 seniors graduated. At the end of the school year, Larry Cuthel's role as director and his leadership of the school came to an end. His service to the school was very much appreciated. We were looking forward to Graham Jones returning to MCS and taking on the position of director.
Hello there, my name is Graham Jones. It was my privilege to be the director of MCS from July 2007 to December 2009. Previously, my wife and I, Liz, have been on staff at MCS from 1996 to 2001, and then we returned back to Australia with our family. And it was good to be invited back to, initially as an interim role for 1 year. I took leave of absence from my work in Australia, but the way MCS gets its claws into you, so to speak, it was great to be able to extend that time and to serve in this role through to the end of 2009. We were very well supported in the role by Waltraut Lanz, particularly as her role as chairman of the MCS board. Not to mention also there was Simon, who was invaluable as a support person who knew the ins and outs of the school, looked after the national staff very well, but also had very good relationships with the local authorities, the army, the special branch, the police, and all those branches of the authorities that we had to deal with in the security situation that we found ourselves. One of the more amusing things was having to have a box of ammunition under my desk. That was seen as the safest place at the time before it being distributed to the security guards. That was certainly a change from the previous time that we'd been at MCS. We did our best to continue on the great ministry of MCS. We worked very hard to develop the curriculum and to advance it and bring it up to date. And I acknowledge the very hard work of our staff, both teaching and boarding in assisting with that. We had Albert in maintenance and doing a great job there. We had Chris in the office. We had Woody doing the finances, and there was many others I could mention. It was a great privilege to be there. We tackled some other major projects, such as refurbishing Sands. It was the first time Sands had been properly heated with central heating, and David Wood came back especially to help in that regard and worked tirelessly day and night to bring Sands up into the modern era, as it were. And it was great to invite boys back into that facility again, and even though as it turned out to be a rather short time, it was still great to have boys there and being able to commute back to school. We also tackled as a team some of the new developments at the school side of campus as well. I particularly think of the kitchen redevelopment and bringing that up into the 21st century as well, and that was a huge amount of work, but the long-term benefits are there for all to see. Obviously, we were concerned about security, and we had to be nimble and flexible, making hard decisions about freedom for students, whether we could go to Islamabad on particular occasions, whether we could go across into Murree, and things could change at the drop of a hat. And one such change was the assassination of Benazir Bhutto. And there was riots in Murree and Jika Gully and the surrounding areas, and it was quite a tense time. But thankfully, the school was protected through that period, and we went into lockdown for a period, but then we came out of that with as much freedom as we could. It was a great privilege to be at MCS again. It's had a huge ministry over the years, and I'm glad to say it continued on very strongly, and it's great to have someone of Simon's calibre come over and be the director right up until this day. So I just want to acknowledge the work of MCS and give you a little bit of a snapshot of the period where we were there. Thank you.